videos, I've talked about music a little bit, and I'm going to go back to talking about more stories from when I was younger this time. So I told the story about how my Uncle Richard became the Flash, and so I was thinking about it, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about my dad's other brother, my Uncle Mike. So, like, one of the earliest memories I have of certain things is I remember one time we went over to his house, and so it was like me and my brother and a couple cousins and everything like that, and the next door neighbor had this like weird little garage shed thing by the house, and we all had the same dream about this like weird old like witch woman or something like that. I don't remember much about it. I remember us all waking up the next day and talking about it, and then later when we lived in that house after my mom and dad divorced, we moved back to Illinois from Arkansas, and we lived in Uncle Mike's house for a little bit. And I remember one time we were all over there watching a horror movie. I don't remember what we were watching, but something happened in the movie, and when that happened in the movie, one of the windows like fell and just made a really loud bang and scared the crap out of all of us. So that's kind of like some stuff about that house. But he ended up moving into a different house, and like one of the things I always remember about going over there, it was just always, it always seemed clean, everything always seemed taken care of. For me being younger, another thing, it was always a safe place to go, and you could just kind of relax a little bit. So I don't remember how often that we would go over there, but we would go over there every once in a while and stay the night and things like that. And one of my cousins had this little room that wasn't much bigger than a closet, but there was like a couple bunk beds in there and like a dresser and a TV. So like one of the things that we would always do when we would go over there is we would always stay up late in the night and play Super Mario Brothers 3 on the Nintendo. You know, so much so that the next day your thumbs would just be sore from playing Super Mario until everybody passed out. And I think we had the Game Genie at the time, so or they had the Game Genie at the time. And so if you don't know what a Game Genie is, it was for the old Nintendos and Segas and Super Nintendos and everything. You had the cartridges, and then you had a thing that slid on top of it that would kind of let you, if you had the right code, you could program in a cheat code like infinite lives or super jump or stuff like that. So I remember we'd just play that game to no end. The other big thing about going over there is they had stairs. And, you know, that doesn't seem like a big thing or anything like that, but I've said before that we were young geniuses. So someone had a sleeping bag. So what we would do is either one or two or three of us would get in one of the sleeping bags and then just ride the sleeping bags kind of like a luge down the stairwell. So that was always fun to do. But like, thinking about it now and looking back at the way things have been, my Uncle Mike always seemed like he had to be the one, or he was always the one that had to be, how would be the best way to say it, the adult in the situation when it came to most things with the family, or the responsible one. Anytime anything happened, it was like he was taking care of it. Like one of the things that always stood out to me about him is that, you know, my dad drove semis. He was never around. And then like in between that, he would have different trucking companies, or he'd be working here, or he'd be working there. He never really had like that one stable job, where my Uncle Mike, I think at one point it was General Tire and Continental Tire. It's changed the name a couple times, but the town of Mount Vernon has a factory that makes tires right outside of it. And he worked there, you know, that was his job. He went to work there, and he worked his whole working career there. And so that always kind of stood out to me. And with that, you know, because he had stable employment, and around there he had what was considered a good job. So to me, you know, they were rich. They had a house. They didn't move constantly. You know, my cousins had nicer clothes. He had nicer cars, things like that. You know, they went out to eat every once in a while, which is something we rarely did. But you know, it seemed like he was more present with his kids and did things with them. That my dad, like I said, he drove a truck. He would come back every once in a while, and then, you know, you didn't want to bother him because he was only going to be there for a day or two, and then he was turning around and leaving. But Uncle Mike was always there growing up and everything. And it even seems that way now, is that if someone in the family has a problem, especially up there, they turn to Uncle Mike to try to help fix it. So like, when I was in the Army, we were getting ready to go to Czechoslovakia to do training. And so we were going to go take the tanks over there for a week or two, something like that. And I remember thinking, oh man, I don't really want to do this. And I'm sitting there packing my bag the night before we're supposed to leave. And this guy comes, knocks on my door. And it's the guy there's a thing called CQ, where a person, well, two people stay 24 hours. And at nighttime, they make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do and things of that nature. Well, he knocks on the door and said, I've been trying to get a hold of people. I don't know who to get a hold of, but we just got a Red Cross message for you. And it said that your dad had a stroke and that he is in the hospital in St. Louis. And I was like, okay. And at this point, it had been years since I'd called anybody from Illinois, and I didn't remember phone numbers. Yeah, there was a time when you didn't have a phone or a device where you could put everything into and put someone's name in it and stuff like that. So I couldn't remember the phone numbers. And so I'd gotten one phone number, and it was to like a vet or something like that. And then I got this older lady, and I was like, I don't know what time it is there. And I told her I'm a soldier in Germany, and my dad, had a stroke, and I'm trying to call home and stuff like that. And she was like, I'm like, I'm sorry to bother you and everything. And she's like, oh, this is probably the nicest wrong number I've ever gotten. And so, like, the next day, I got tickets and everything. And, like, the only person I knew to call to see if they could pick me up in St. Louis was my Uncle Mike. And so, the next morning, one of my tank commanders comes up, and he's like, hey, I got this number for you. Somehow I think his wife heard about what was going on, and she got the number to my dad's hospital room. And so I called the number, and I talked to my dad for a minute, and he gives me the phone number to my uncle. And so I call, and I do have to say real quick, like, even Uncle Mike's had a bunch of stuff happen to him, and like his first wife, Aunt Alice, she ended up passing away when I was younger, and he had to deal with that, and 3 kids and everything, but he got remarried to a really nice lady. But going back to the story, so I called, and a lady answers the phone, and it's been a while since I talked to anybody up there, and I was like, may I ask who's speaking, please? And she's like, this is Judith Field. And I'm like, Aunt Judy. And she's like, who is this? And I was like, it's Mark. And she's like, oh, you called? And I was like, yeah, I called. And I was like, I'm flying into St. Louis tomorrow. Is there any way Uncle Mike can be up there to pick me up? And she's like, yeah. So they got all the information and everything, and they met me at the hospital, or they met me at the airport, took me to the hospital. I saw my dad for the first time in like, had to be like 5 years or so at that point. And since then I've went back to Illinois a couple times, and I've stayed at his house a couple times, but he's always seemed to be, like I said, that one person that if you needed, you could count on him. Even though I rarely talk to him. I've only seen him a handful of times over the last 20-30 years. But thinking about it over the last few days and looking at it, the crazy thing I can say about all this is me rationalize everything the way that I do. Is that, oh, hold on a second. This little rough spot on the bridge. If you want to look at it one way, my Uncle Mike was probably the best role model of how a man should be in my family. And to me, that's high praise that I can say as me as a person, that I can say about thinking about him and the way that he always was to me growing up. And then looking, you know, he to me, he always seemed like a hard worker, and he took care of his family, and he was there, and he was present. And he could always be counted on to do what was needed to do for somebody. And he always seemed happy to want to help to do it for everybody. Which, you know, some people you can't say that about. But it always seemed like he was the most adult out of everybody, especially the aunts and uncles that were in Illinois. My Uncle Richard never left home. My Aunt Paula, things just always seemed crazy. And my dad, but Uncle Mike always seemed the most solid person in my dad's side of the family. And so I don't really know where to go from here. But I will say, thinking about it, you know, I try to be the best person that I can, and I have moments where I get mad, and I know I shouldn't, but at the time it just builds and I blow up, and I know I shouldn't be that way. And I'm trying to be the best person I can, to be the best example for you. That way you have a better example as a father than what I had. And with that, all the rest I'm going to say is that I'm always going to try to do my best for you. And I'll make mistakes along the way, and I'm trying to get better with things that I do. But always know this, that I love you, Finn, and I will always love you. Bye.